You're the master blender here at the Edrington Group, so what's your involvement with Highland Park?
I look after the quality of Highland Park from the day it's distilled at the distilleries right through to the point it goes into the bottle.
So a little bit involved in Highland Park then?
Just a little bit,
Just
yeah.
a little bit. So I'm going to ask you some questions about marrying and chill filtration.
Yep.
These are sort of terms that we hear a lot on the road, and I get asked lots of questions about them. So can you tell people what actually is marrying? What's cask harmonization? What's that all about?
Well, marrying is where we take the individual casks of whisky, we put it all together. We've got the flavour the way we want it when we've created the vatting of Highland Park. But what we've then got to do is add water to take the strength down from probably cask strength, about 60%, down to 40 or 43. Now, when you add water to whisky, you create a lot of disruption to that whisky. If you think about it, the whisky's been lying there for 12 years. It's nice and calm, nice and settled. It's probably reasonably bright, but when you add water to that, it goes cloudy. Now, if we were to take the strength straight down in one go from 60 down to 40, you've actually created a lot of cloud there, and it means you've got to filter really hard to get that haze or that cloud out of the whisky. By marrying, we add the water at two different stages. We take it down to about 45.5%, creates a little bit of haze. By leaving the whisky and the water to settle down for a couple of months, that haze level drops down, and that means when we come to add the final amount of water for bottling, there's very little haze generated, and we can be much more gentle in the filtration.
I see and hear lots of people in blended whiskies doing that. Is that something that single malt whiskies do as well, or is that
It's probably
some people do it, some people don't?
Some people have stopped doing it. A lot of companies have stopped doing marrying altogether now because it's an expensive process. When you think about it, we're paying to store water for another period of time. Now, a lot of the financial experts would rather we cut that out and just took the whole lot straight down in one go to the bottling strength. But it does create a difference in the quality of the whisky. It's something we have still hung on to, even for the expense of it.
So you always tell me about this alcohol puddle theory. Do you want to explain that a little bit more than normal?
The theory came from Dr. John Pigott at Strathclyde University, and he suggests that if you were to look at whisky under a microscope, there are three main constituents in there. There's the alcohol, the ethanol, water, and flavours. Now, the alcohol and flavours molecules are all organics. They like to stick together in puddles, as he called them, and then the whole thing is surrounded by a matrix of water. If you add more water to that, you break up those alcohol puddles and the flavours that are in them, and the flavours are now sitting in water. They're not soluble in water, they're soluble in alcohol. So that's what causes the haze to appear, is by adding more water, these things come out of solution, you can start to see them. By giving the whisky time to marry and settle down, you allow these alcohol puddles to reform. Some of the hazes will redissolve in that, and your haze level goes back down again.
Right. And then once you've done that, once you've married the whisky for a period of time, what do you do then?
We then have to filter it.
All right.
What we will do is we'll take, because we've got a number of batches of each age of Highland Park, say 12-year-old, we'll maybe take a small amount out of 5 or 6 different batches. That way, if we've got a variation between the batches, we're trying to minimise that by taking a small amount of each one. Yeah. We'll take that, we add the final amount of water to take it down to about 43% or 40%, depending on the market, and we then have to chill filter it. And chill filtration is just like putting coffee through a coffee filter paper. That's the filter paper. Right. We use big sheets. It's probably about 5-6 millimetres thick. The whisky is pushed through this in one of these plate and frame filters. Yep. Probably about 72 square metres of these the whisky goes through for a batch of 12-year-old. And at the end of it, the end of the life of the filter, we've got something that looks like this. So it's taken out the fine char that's come out of the casks. It's also taken out some of the fats that are causing that haze in the whisky, and you end up with a bright, clear whisky at the end of it.
But I suppose the purpose of this is not to take out, not to strip too much flavour, isn't it? It's just to really take the haze and the dirt from the inside of the cask.
That's correct. We filter at a much warmer temperature than most other companies. We filter at +4 degrees. Now, that's a warm day in Scotland if you've ever been here. When it gets to 4 degrees, we get the barbecues out.
Absolutely.
Most of the other companies in the industry will use either 0 or even down to -5 to filter. But we've spent years getting the flavour into the whisky. It seems kind of daft to strip it right out at the end of it. So all we're looking to do is to create a nice, bright, clear whisky for the consumer. And also to make sure that any chill haze has disappeared, or any chance of a chill haze. And that's where, if the whisky goes to a cold country and it's stored at a cold temperature for a period of time, that haze can reform. By chilling it down to 4 degrees, we're hoping that we've got a fairly stable whisky.
So when I have my Highland Park 30-year-old or 40-year-old and I put a little bit of water in it, it goes
It will
cloudy
do,
or
yeah.
hazy. That's not a bad thing, is it?
That's not a bad thing. That's just the flavours coming out. And with the 30 and 40-year-old, we're actually at a higher strength, so we haven't chill filtered those. What we'll have done is just done one pass through a filter like this, but at an ambient temperature, and that leaves in as much as we can. All it's doing is taking out the char and any other sort of pieces of wood or fibre that might have been in the whisky from the cask.